Imagine possessing such immense wealth that the entire world transforms into your personal playground. Emperor Elagabalus didn't merely ponder this as a hypothetical. He simply made it a reality. He hosted lavish banquets where tables gleamed with silver, dishes were adorned with crushed pearls, and delicacies were sourced from the furthest reaches of his empire. Examples include flamingo tongues, ostrich brains, and eels that, according to some sinister rumors, were fattened on the remains of Christian slaves. While possibly an exaggeration, such tales become plausible when power is absolute and knows no bounds. In ancient Rome, wealth signified not just material possessions, but unlimited power, the ability to decide who lived, who died, and how they would be remembered by posterity. Yet, beyond these unbelievable feasts, magnificent palaces, and piles of gold coins, something deeper lay hidden. It was a lifestyle founded on unrestrained opulence, an obsession with appearance, and an insatiable desire to leave an indelible mark on history. Today, we delve into the world of those at the pinnacle of this power pyramid to discover what they ate, how they dressed, where they spent their nights, and what occupied the thoughts of the most powerful men and women of history's most influential empire. You will come to understand that wealth is not always the gleam of gold, but something far darker, more alluring, and ultimately more human. To grasp the true essence of power in ancient Rome, one must turn to the figure of Marcus Licinius Crassus. He did not sit on an imperial throne, bear the title of Caesar, nor was he acquainted with popular affection or the laurels of a celebrated general. Crassus represented something more refined and calculating. He was the silent architect of boundless economic might, a man who skillfully turned chaos into prosperity and tragedies into new horizons of opportunity. His ascent began during the ruthless purges orchestrated by Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a dictator who mercilessly eliminated political opponents and confiscated their property. While Rome mourned its losses, Crassus bought. Entire estates went under the hammer for a pittance, under the duress of fear or outright coercion. Crassus, maintaining an unruffled demeanor, and with a bag of coins at the ready, acquired them one by one. He perfectly understood that every empty house was a potential goldmine. However, Crassus's true genius lay in his unique business model. Crassus literally built his fortune on fire. He established a team of enslaved firefighters. When a fire broke out, he would be among the first to arrive, not with water, but with an offer to purchase the burning property. Then, utilizing the labor of over 500 enslaved architects and builders, he would reconstruct the buildings in the shortest possible time. Within a few years, he had established control over entire districts of Rome, not through inheritance or military victories, but through a meticulously planned strategy. Marcus Licinius Crassus, a figure whose name is etched into the annals of history as a symbol of unrestrained wealth and political might. His financial standing was so colossal that, according to Plutarch's estimates, it exceeded 7,000 talents of gold, a sum equivalent to the annual budget of the Roman Empire. To gauge the scale, imagine a single individual today possessing wealth comparable to the gross domestic product of an entire European nation. However, Crassus was not merely a rich man. He was a shaper of destinies. He generously funded political campaigns, exerted pressure on senators, and bought loyalty as effortlessly as an ordinary citizen purchased bread at the market. He was one of the three pillars of the famous First Triumvirate, alongside Pompey and Julius Caesar. And whilst his name may not be immortalized in marble with the same pomp, his influence was undeniable. But what was the price of such exorbitant ambitions? Crassus's life ended tragically during one of Rome's most devastating military ventures, the Parthian campaign. According to one account, he was executed. According to another, the Parthians, as a warning against his greed, forced him to drink molten gold. Whether truth or myth, This story serves as an eternal reminder. In times of crisis, some flee, whilst others buy assets. In Rome, however, he who paid the piper called the tune. Wealth was not defined by what you possessed, but by what you could afford. And no one dared to challenge that rule. In the heyday of the Roman Empire, the measure of prestige and power was by no means jingling coins, but vast landholdings. Acres of fertile soil, majestic marble columns, exquisite mosaics adorning the walls of spacious halls, every element of luxury unequivocally declared the owner's high status. The opulent villas of the patricians were not merely dwellings, but veritable micro-empires, where a Roman aristocrat had no need to leave the confines of his estate. At his disposal were picturesque gardens, private baths, extensive libraries, shrines, and numerous slaves ensuring comfort and catering to every need. The grand atria were designed to astound visitors. High ceilings, ornamental fountains imported from Greece, sculptures, and frescoes created by renowned artists of the era, all testified to the owner's wealth and refined taste. However, the most crucial sign of high standing was not ostentatious glitter, but a privilege hidden from prying eyes: access to water. The complex aqueduct systems that supplied Rome with water were engineering marvels, yet only the chosen few could boast direct pipes leading into their homes. The presence of a private swimming pool with running water in a villa automatically elevated its owner to the pinnacle of the social hierarchy. In Pompeii, a city forever frozen in time by the eruption of Vesuvius, archaeologists have uncovered villas spanning up to 3,000 square meters, adorned with frescoes depicting ancestral heroic deeds, gold-decorated ceilings, and indoor gardens with sophisticated underground irrigation systems. It should be noted that wealthy Romans were not limited to urban residences. They possessed numerous estates, country villas in Campania, summer residences in Latium, and even extensive lands in conquered provinces. These holdings were worked by slaves and tenants, producing wine, wheat, olive oil, and livestock not only for personal consumption but also for trade, which undoubtedly bolstered the owner's influence. In Roman society, land ownership meant possessing power, and not solely due to its fertility. No one dared to set foot on that land without the owner's permission. For, beyond external luxury, the true privilege was having personal space. Space allowing for peaceful rest, unhurried meals, quiet contemplation, and solitude. Indeed, in crowded, dirty, noisy, and unsafe Rome, silence was also a valuable form of wealth. In ancient Rome, dining was elevated to a genuine art form, far exceeding mere necessity. Like any creation, it unfolded on a specially prepared stage before a select audience, pursuing a lofty goal, to silently demonstrate the host's power and influence. Roman banquets were not just meals, but meticulously orchestrated ceremonies, beginning at dusk and continuing late into the night. It all commenced with the solemn arrangement of the triclinium, a hall where guests reclined on sumptuous couches made of silver or intricately carved wood. Guests were seated according to their social standing, and each place held significance. The privilege of being near the host served as an unspoken political statement. Slaves, trained to move silently, served guests spiced wine, fragrant water for hand washing, and exquisite appetizers such as fresh oysters, stuffed eggs, and honey bread. Then began the main spectacle, the serving of main courses, where imagination knew no bounds. Whole animals were brought to the tables, skillfully stuffed with other fauna, a boar with birds roasting inside, fish prepared with small snakes. Each dish was intended to evoke unfeigned delight. Ingredients were brought from the most distant corners of the empire: garum from Spain, succulent dates from Africa, delicate lobsters from Sicily, fragrant truffles from northern Italy. However, the true purpose was not refined taste, but to impress and astonish those gathered. In an era of unbridled extravagance, Where wealth flowed like a river, feasts transcended mere meals to become theatrical spectacles designed to astound and showcase the host's limitless capabilities. Often, beneath glittering plates, gold coins were hidden, unexpected gifts intended to surprise and delight guests. Culinary masterpieces were served within ice sculptures, slowly melting under admiring gazes, as if underscoring the fleeting nature of earthly pleasures. Drinks, from sparkling wine to exotic liqueurs, were served in exquisite Venetian crystal or weighty gold goblets, symbolizing affluence and refined taste. As a sign of special favor and a demonstration of disdain for the mundane, guests were offered not water, but pure wine to wash their hands, emphasizing that for them, there were no limits or prohibitions. Desserts astonished with their variety and magnificence. Fruit steeped in amber honey, sweets strewn with delicate rose petals, and ice cream made from snow brought from the distant Alps. All this gastronomic splendor was accompanied by performances from poets reciting verses, musicians drawing enchanting sounds from harps and flutes, and comedians whose jokes were intended to entertain and appease the discerning audience. Entertainment was an integral part of the banquet menu, creating an atmosphere of hedonism and carefree indulgence. Strict rules of etiquette applied. Eating hastily was considered bad manners, and refusing an offered dish could be perceived as a personal insult to the host. At the same time, paradoxically, vomiting was considered an entirely acceptable practice, allowing one to make room for new gastronomic delights. The purpose of the feast was not satiety, but a demonstration of endurance and the capacity to bear an excess of luxury. At these banquets, strength was not measured, but rather stomach capacity and a willingness to go to extremes to prove one's superiority over others. In majestic Rome, attire conveyed far more than mere aesthetic function. It served as a powerful political manifesto, where every element of clothing, from fabric to adornments and hairstyle, acted as a silent yet eloquent declaration of the wearer's status and convictions. It was a kind of social passport, a calling card, and symbolic armor representing the individual even before they uttered their first word. The tunics of wealthy patricians were crafted from rare and expensive materials, such as the finest linen or silk imported from distant China. However, the true significance lay in the color. Tyrian purple, extracted from sea mollusks through a laborious and extremely costly process, was reserved exclusively for the most influential individuals. Only emperors and select senators were permitted to be clad head to toe in this color. Even a purple border on a toga served as an unmistakable sign of proximity to power and membership of the elite. However, fashion in ancient Rome was not limited to clothing. The entire body was adorned, transforming into a living work of art. Women from aristocratic families wore hairstyles so intricate and elaborate that their creation took many hours, requiring the skill of experienced stylists capable of braiding, raising, and securing capillary structures resembling living crowns. Some ladies used wigs brought from North Africa, whilst others anointed their hair with precious aromatic oils, the cost of which was exorbitant. Women's hairstyles changed not only under the influence of fashion trends, but also in accordance with political currents. If an empress set a new style, the entire elite immediately adopted it, thereby demonstrating their loyalty and devotion to the ruling establishment. In ancient Rome, even men's facial hair carried symbolic weight. Emperor Hadrian, contrary to existing norms, popularized the wearing of a thick beard, which instantly transformed the male ideal of beauty for a whole decade. Jewelry played a huge role in Roman life, being an integral part of their appearance. Numerous rings adorning every finger, lavish pearl necklaces, and weighty gold bracelets were highly prized. Some Roman women, striving to emphasize their wealth, wore necklaces so heavy that they required assistance to walk. At that time, a ring served not only a decorative function, but also as a kind of seal, authenticating letters, contracts, and decrees, replacing a personal signature. Wealthy Romans owned several rings, each intended for specific purposes. Even pets were not overlooked, with special adornments created for them. Cats strutted in collars, whilst falcons were decorated with silver bells. Pliny the Elder mentioned a woman whose wealth allowed her to gift emerald bracelets to moray eels. Such generous gestures, known as munera, were ostentatious, memorable, and undoubtedly costly. However, they paid dividends many times over, as they not only elevated the giver's status but also secured them influence, respect, and often immunity within society. In ancient Rome, where wealth and power intertwined in a complex tapestry of social relations, affluent citizens often demonstrated generosity by allocating significant sums to the needs of the common people. However, these acts of charity were not always driven by genuine compassion. Rather, they were a carefully calculated move aimed at strengthening political influence. Supporting the plebs, expressed through the provision of bread, wine, or oil, could be a decisive factor in important political decisions. Inscriptions that have survived to us vividly illustrate this trend. They contain phrases such as, "So-and-so paid for the restoration of this aqueduct for the glory of his family," or "So-and-so gave this fountain to the people and was elected aedile the following year." Even death became an opportunity for generosity. Many Romans left detailed instructions in their wills for distributing money to the needy, freeing slaves, and funding public spectacles. They were driven not by remorse, but by a desire to preserve a good memory of their family name. In a society where ancestor veneration and care for descendants were of immense importance, every act of charity became a symbolic way to immortalize one's name in history. Undoubtedly, there were also examples of selfless help, such as the activities of Pliny the Younger, who provided financial support for the education of orphans. However, in most cases, charity in ancient Rome was a carefully calculated investment. In a society where the possession of wealth and power opened every door, the only way to leave a truly lasting mark was to shape a certain image in the memory of descendants. To give in Rome did not mean to lose. It meant to invest in one's immortality. 2 millennia later, the Roman Empire continues to exert its influence, evident not only in ancient statues and majestic ruins, but also in modern habits. Contemporary society may have abandoned purple togas and slaves anointing hands with perfumes, replacing them with expensive watches, designer clothes, private jets, and luxurious villas overlooking the sea. Yet, the underlying principle remains unchanged: the desire to wordlessly demonstrate superiority and control over a situation. Social media has transformed into a semblance of the ancient Roman triclinium, where users post photos of food, recount travels, and showcase their style, aiming not so much to share information as to underscore their status and create an impression of a more prosperous life. Instead of minting their own images on coins, people feature their photographs in advertising campaigns, associate them with well-known brands, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and immortalize them in company founder biographies. Modern feasts take place at private parties, whilst Roman villas have morphed into armored penthouses. Public donations have become charity campaigns widely covered in the media. Even the ability to manage one's own time remains a symbol of the elite. As in ancient times, he who can afford not to work, yet still generate income, is considered successful. Essentially, only the form has changed, whilst the content remains the same. Society continues to believe that value lies in external displays, that wealth, power, and status must be demonstrated, and that their absence is tantamount to their non-existence. In this reflection of the past, Rome appears not merely as a historical civilization, but as an eternal benchmark, a set of rules and principles that we, often unconsciously, continue to apply in our modern lives. It is worth pausing for a moment and asking ourselves, if fate had cast us into the era of ancient Rome, what place in that world would we have occupied? Would we have awakened in luxury, amidst linen sheets, surrounded by elegant statues and manicured private gardens? Or would we have had to trudge barefoot along cobbled streets, carrying water for others, deprived of a voice and the ability to influence our destiny? The truth is that in Rome, as in any society throughout history, the prosperity of some was inextricably linked to the deprivations and poverty of others. And whilst the grandeur of their monuments has faded over time, their ideas of power, social hierarchy, and prestige still influence the modern world. Therefore, the question naturally arises, has humanity truly evolved, or have we merely changed the masks that conceal our true nature? What struck you most when studying the history of Rome? At what point did you feel that the past resonated too strongly with the present? For understanding Rome is, in essence, understanding ourselves, realizing who we are and where we come from. And one should always remember the immutable truth. A people who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its mistakes.